Hi, in this video I'll be sharing my story about how I increased my CRA score from the 450s till the 500s by learning French. I learned French over a period of 15 months while keeping a full-time job. I'll also be sharing a framework for beginners who wish to learn French to immigrate to Canada in the fastest way possible. And at the end of this video, I have a very special gift for people who would watch till the end. So stay tuned and let's get started. So I started out very basically. I just went on Google. I typed TEF Canada exam. What is it and how to clear this exam? Is there anyone who has already cleared this exam? And if they have made some material, some video about what was the syllabus of this test, because this is what we think of it at the beginning of it. This is like an exam that you have to clear. It's like a UPSC exam or a banking IPO exam or whatever exam that we always are used to be giving since high school, or even before that for that matter, in the Indian setup. So I started out, I typed on Google TEF Canada exam beginner, how to get B2 plus. Now there were some videos out there, very few of them, but there were some videos which claimed that we are experts, in the French language, and that we are highly qualified. And there was one video in which the person was saying that I have myself cleared the TEF Canada exam, and this is the way to go about it. So the conventional, traditional way, the approach, the advice that I got was that you have to basically, there is a syllabus to this exam, and I'll kind of talk about how misplaced and how ignorant that strategy is, how bad that strategy is. And if you really apply it, you're not going to clear this exam. I know people personally whom I was studying with, and they were also implementing that strategy. It's been more than 2 years since September 2020, and they were studying well before me. They still haven't cleared the exam. And I really feel bad for them, because they are hardworking people and they have put in the effort. They didn't get the result because the expert advice was not so good. And I started out in September 2020. So the expert advice goes and says that there are two French grammar books that you have to learn. Primarily Complete French Grammar by Annie Hemingway, and the other is Sentence Builder, French Sentence Builder, I think. And after that, there are three vocabulary books called primarily Edito A1, Edito A2, Edito B1. And it is said by these experts that if you study till Edito B1 level, that is good enough for you to clear the TEF Canada exam at the B2 plus level, because the strategy, the vocabulary and the French language in the Edito B1 book itself is so rich that it will make you go through B2 plus in the TEF Canada exam. Now I started out with this journey. I was very excited. I was like, yes, I've got a syllabus now and there's an exam. I've always cracked exams since high school. I got into a great college, and after that I also cracked a number of exams through college. This is just like any other exam, there are two books that I have to study. There are grammar books, and French is very close to English. I can recognize the alphabets. I can recognize how sentences are looking, at least. I can know what is an A, what is an E. I just need to kind of learn the system of this. I need to learn grammar. And once I learn grammar and a lot of vocabulary from these books, I would be able to crack this exam. Now, the naive me did not know what I am up against. So I started out very happily. I did all those grammar books. I also downloaded this application called Duolingo, and I did it religiously. I followed it. I did it. It was very boring, to be honest. Duolingo, although, is very exciting and colorful at the beginning, but after you kind of progress through the application, it is so repetitive that it kind of takes away the joy of learning. And I'll come to that later in the later part of the video, but let me tell you about my experience with this advice. So 6 months into this process, and by the way, I was also kind of watching some French content, as was advised that you should watch some series. You should watch some series on Netflix, watch a movie or two, listen to some French podcast and whatnot. So I started out. I did the grammar books. I started learning what is the basic grammar, je suis, tu es, on est, all the conjugations and all of that. And then progressively I became very good at grammar. I could really answer questions. I could fill in all the blanks in those complete French grammar books. and I started to think that I'm learning the French language. I reached till the B1 level as was advised, and I kind of did the books. I wouldn't say I completely did all the chapters, every fill in the blank very religiously, but I did a lot of it. And those books were something that I thought that they are making me learn French, that I'm learning French, and I'm actually going to pass this exam. And because I know all the grammar now, I know what is the conditionnel, I know le subjonctif, I know a lot of things. So, a part of me told me that let's try this knowledge. 6 months into this process. So I started in September 2020, and by the time of February or March of 2021, I felt very prepared. I told myself this syllabus is done now, and I have learned the grammar, I know the French language, I have followed the advice given to me by my teachers, I've always done that, and this time also I'll crack this exam. But I wanted to test my knowledge, like before I get into the real exam. So I booked a lesson by one of the French teachers. She is a native French teacher. Her name was Monique Mouzet, and she was available on italki. I heard of italki because there are some language teachers out there, and I wanted to kind of test my French knowledge and also validate it from her that I have already achieved the B1 level in French. So the lesson starts. I booked the lesson. In a matter of days, the lesson start. And in a very thick accent. And one thing I really want you to know about Monique Mouzet is that she doesn't speak English. She doesn't speak any other language. And I was so confident that I can at least do basic talk in French and I can actually communicate with her that, it's fine. I will manage. Because you know what, I have B1 in French already. I have done my work, I have done the grammar books, I know all the grammar, I know the difference between the two kind of past tense in French, which is imparfait and the past perfect, which is basically like there are two sentences, there are two kinds of past tenses in French. So I know the nuances of it, I know the subjunctive, I know like the conditionnel, I know good amount of vocabulary, So I started this lesson, and the first word was clear, bonjour, bonjour. We exchanged the basic hello, hi. And after that, she started really talking in French. And she asked me a lot of, she was actually speaking with a very thick French accent, because obviously she is a native French speaker. She only speaks French, that is her mother tongue, and also the national language and all the language. She doesn't know any other language apart from French. Now, I just sat there and I did not know what she's even saying. This is 6 months of my preparation. She said, now that I recall it, she said, "Comment allez-vous?" Which means, how are you? Or if we were to literally translate it, it means, how are you going? Which essentially means, how are you? And I couldn't even understand what she said. I was like, are you talking in French or this is some another language? And then she started asking me more questions, and I felt like a deaf or a dumb person. Like I couldn't even understand what she's saying, let alone I didn't even have words to describe like what am I feeling like, how am I? Like I knew that there was this phrase called "je vais bien," "merci beaucoup," "je vais bien," "je vais très bien," but that's it. I couldn't make any other sentence after that. And this was the struggle with my study partner also, because yes, I kind of forgot. In the conventional advice, it is also told that find a study partner, and you guys are beginners, so you study together, and you will help each other. You will keep each other accountable, which is fine. I mean, that's good advice that you need to have a study partner. But the study partner is equally bad at French as you are, and the study partner doesn't have an accent. The study partner doesn't know how to talk in French. So now when I enter this lesson with this, this lady from France, and she is talking to me like a real French person, I just don't know how to talk. Like, I don't know. I was not prepared for this. Like, I was not expecting her to give me like a grammar test and tell me how would you use the subjunctive in this, or tell me how would you use the imparfait in this, which is one kind of past tense in French. I knew that was not going to happen. We were going to have a conversation. But I thought that the grammar books and the vocabulary books is exactly what it is. I learn all the grammar, I'll be the master of grammar. And once I do that, I will be able to speak in French flawlessly. Like, what's the big deal? But in that lesson, I couldn't even bring myself to just introduce myself. When she said, I really distinctly remember this. When she said, "Como vous appelez," which means "what is your name?" I couldn't understand what she just said. Like she had to type it in the chat box. Como vous appelez, and when I read it, when I finally recognized the words which were kind of written in that chat box, only then did I realize, oh, she's asking "Como vous appelez," because I was not used to hearing French with a real French person. And that day, my self-confidence, my ego of being a good student, my illusion that I have the B1 level in French already. And actually I was planning that in the next 4 to 5 months, because the conventional advice says it takes 10 to 11 months to learn French. I thought I'll be booking my exam and getting over with this in the mid of 2021. I still have diaries, with those plans written very clearly, that complete this French exam by September of 2021 or even August of 2021. And in this lesson, where I just wanted to just validate it, that I already have the B1 level at least in French, I could not bring myself to introduce myself. And this was the same problem with my study partner, who was following the same advice. Obviously, I am making it a little more dramatic. I mean, I knew how to introduce myself. I know how je m'appelle Anubhav and j'ai 25 ans. At that time, I was 23 years old. So j'ai 23 ans and je vais bien, merci beaucoup, je travaille dans un bureau. I had those very basic sentences. But that's not a conversation. I mean, I couldn't actually talk to her. I just had some grammar rules in my mind. I had a lot of vocabulary, rich vocabulary, but I did not know how to join those words. I couldn't bring myself to actually talk in French or even understand what she was saying. 6 months later into my study, this was a disaster. And my self-confidence, my everything went very down. My entire morale broke down after that lesson. It was only for 30 minutes, and those 30 minutes passed like years for me, because it was pure embarrassment. It was pure torture for me, because she actually said it in French. She wrote down that I have clearly mentioned that I do not understand any other language apart from French. So why did you book this lesson with me? She was also a little frustrated, although she is very kind, so she was courteous about it. But she wrote it that why did you book a lesson with me? Because your level right now is only A1. A1 level. After 6 months, after doing those grammar books, after doing a shitload of vocabulary lessons and feeling very prepared, I was told, boss, you just have A1 level in both listening and speaking. I did not even try after that to actually give a written test, because I knew that I was very bad at writing. All I knew was some grammar rules. And you know what? This was actually a turning point in my French studies. I sat down with myself, very frustrated, very angry, and very disappointed in myself that, I've always been a great student. What just happened with me? I mean, I could have done a better job. But instead of cursing myself, I started questioning what went wrong. And that is when I started a process of learning and kind of actually researching. Instead of typing on Google how to clear TEF Canada exam, this time I was searching for how to learn a language effectively. So long story short, I started learning how to learn a language after that lesson with Monique. And during April of 2021, unfortunately, my dad contracted COVID-19, and I started spending a lot of time looking after him and also managing my full-time job, because remember, I am completely employed, like full-time employed during this entire period of learning. So I have to manage that. I have to manage my family, and I did not study for a good period of 1 month. When I resumed, looking at French, I started approaching how to learn a new language effectively. So this time when I went on Google, I did not type how to learn about how to clear TEF Canada exam. I started typing about how to learn French or any other language effectively, like what it takes to be fluent in a language, what it takes to actually have that conversation that I wanted to have with Monique in March of 2021. And what was it that I was not doing that could have made me fluent in this 6 months of time? So I kind of wasted that. I wouldn't say I wasted 6 months, because yes, I did build a foundation of good vocabulary, which is very important. I did build a foundation of some basic grammar, a very strong foundation that is, and that is nice. But that is not what it is. That is not language learning. And that is when I started investing in the process. I started listening to TED Talks. I purchased a lot of books, and I came across some names in the industry who are actually people who learned a new language within 3 months, like Benny Lewis. I'm surprised that no one talks about Benny Lewis when it comes to TEF Canada preparation. No one talks about Ollie Richards. No one talks about Steve. They are the real people who have learned languages in record time, and they have learned multiple languages following the same process effectively. In fact, Benny Lewis has cleared a C2 level German exam in a matter of 3 months through the processes that he has kind of discovered and learned from real experts. So I started delving deep into it. I started reading all those books. I started learning all the strategies, the mindsets, the methods that these people have employed to actually learn the French language, and many languages for that. So after this process, I came up with my own strategies, which I will be sharing in future videos. I have a lot to say about vocabulary. I have a lot to say about grammar but one thing that I would straight away tell you right now is that if you are a beginner, and if you just started learning French, or even if you think that you have gone through the same process which is shared by all these experts, and that you have already attained A2 or even B1 level already, and that is something that you think you have attained because you have completed some material, some course material, I would recommend just throw away the grammar book. The grammar book is the biggest villain. It will not allow you to become fluent in the language. In fact, there is proven research, and I'll be linking the links in the description for you to read them. There are research papers written about how excessive grammar learning can actually come in the way of fluency, can actually hamper your chances of actually speaking the language, because your brain is constantly thinking about technically, right? It is like it is always confused which grammar rule to apply. It is always confused which rule to apply in this situation or in that situation or in that situation. It is thinking of something which is pattern oriented in a logical way, and that would always take time. If you have to pause before speaking every sentence to understand which grammar rule should I apply, or how should I apply it, or should I use je suis, or should I use j'ai with this passé composé composition, you can't really bring yourself to speak. Just imagine yourself, like right now, I'm sure that you can speak English and you can speak your regional language. Most people who are watching this video have this is my guess, that if you are from India, you know how to speak Hindi. I know some people from South do not know. I'm not making that gross assumption, but many would know how to speak in Hindi, and fluently, and just think about it, like whenever we speak in Hindi, do we think of grammar rules? This is my challenge to you. There is a thing or a concept called alankar in Hindi. How many of you actually know about it, or even have heard about it? But we use it subconsciously in our day-to-day lives on an everyday basis. Alankar I remember it because yes, there was some grammar book in Hindi that we never used to study, because I never needed a grammar book to talk in Hindi. Even now when I speak in English, I'm not constantly thinking about, should I use the present continuous right now? Should I use the past tense? Should I use future simple tense? Are we really talking in our regional languages or in languages that we are already fluent in that way? Do we always think about grammar rules? No, right? It naturally flows, because this is how your mind is used to hearing the language, is used to speaking the language, and this is the key. Language learning is not about learning the technicalities of grammar. That is for people who want to actually become experts in that language. That is for people who are doing their masters in French. We are not here to do our masters in French. We want to clear an exam. And this is where the biggest realization for me came in, that this exam is not a knowledge test. This exam is not testing your knowledge of the French language. This exam is not testing if you know how to use the subjunctive perfectly or the conditional perfectly in every situation. Absolutely not. Trust me, I got C1 level scores in this exam. I still don't know the science or the rules behind the subjunctive. I just know how to use it. I don't care about the technicalities of it. I don't care about the exceptions of it. I use the subjunctive the way everyone else uses subjunctive. And this is where the difference is. Language learning is different from language acquisition. Language learning is about knowledge of the language. Language acquisition is about the skill of using the language. This TEF Canada exam is not testing your knowledge of French. It is testing the skill that you have been able to develop to use the language. And that doesn't mean that you won't necessarily know about the grammar rules. Ask any French person on the street of France or any other francophonic country. Like, people would not be able to explain why they do what they do, because they don't know why, they just know how. And this is what the exam is testing. This exam is testing your ability to use French. And that is very different from having the knowledge of grammar. My friends, really deep down inside, I really want to drill this point into every person who's watching this video right now. This exam is not a knowledge exam. Books will not get you there. If you have a grammar book, just throw it out of the window right now. You don't need it. I didn't need it. I never touched a grammar book. Very few occasions I touched it. I never touched a grammar book after that point on. Never did. Because I never needed to. My approach of learning French language is based on the idea of comprehensible input. What is this comprehensible input now? So, comprehensible input is essentially something which is comprehensible for a particular learner of a language who has reached one level. For example, if I am at the A2 level, which means that I can read, I can write, I can speak, and I can talk at the A2 level in French, then comprehensible input is something that uses that knowledge of the A2 level and challenges me a little bit to the B1 level. Like, it is one plus step at one time. And the logic is that you learn French by immersing yourself in the French language. You don't learn French by, doing English books by doing books which are actually written in English and explaining you the technicalities of French. That is not useful. If you want to become fluent in a language, if you want your mind to be absorbed in French and you want your mind to kind of intuitively understand the French language just like the way it learns any other language, then you have to immerse yourself. But where do you immerse yourself? For example, if you are at the A1 level and if you immerse yourself only in French movies, which is targeted for native French speakers and perhaps is at the C1 or the C2 level, you won't understand anything, and that is not of use for you. So if you are a French learner, then there are people out there, there are language acquisition coaches out there who have crafted that material, comprehensible input for different levels of the French learners. So for example, if I am at the A1 level or A2 level for that matter, then I will be looking at comprehensible input which is targeted for an A2 level speaker. Now, where do you find these comprehensible inputs? There are a lot of resources, lots and lots of resources, and it is a forest out there. There's a reason why I had to spend so much money to actually, I had to buy so many resources, do 3 to 4 months of research into it to actually carve out a pathway for myself. And I will be making a separate video on each topic. For example, there would be a video on grammar, there would be a video on vocabulary, there would be a video on how to become fluent, how to master the writing section. It is a lot of information. Trust me, it took me 3 months to consume. And in fact, even more than that, even when I started learning French using comprehensible input and I started immersing myself in the French language, even after that, I had to continue learning different methods and trying different strategies. But for now, just remember one thing, that you have to use the power of comprehensible input if you really want to learn the French language effectively in a period of 9 to 12 months while keeping a full-time job. And trust me, it is possible. It is more possible than you have been made to believe. because learning French or any other language is not that difficult, right? If you follow the right method. And the right method is the idea of comprehensible input. Now let me start into what should a beginner do, and I have a framework for it. The name of that framework is called LESS. LESS stands for L is listening, E is engagement, S is speaking. Less, and this is extremely important, especially if you are a beginner or is struggling to actually start speaking and start listening to the French language and understanding what they are saying. Because this is my understanding that for any language learner, the first thing that you have to attack is the listening and the speaking part, and they're connected to each other. The more you listen to a language, every language has a rhythm to itself. English has a certain rhythm, French has a certain rhythm, Hindi has a certain rhythm. It can be thought of or conceptualized as a piece of music, because there is a certain level of pronunciation, there is a certain kind of repetition of certain words, certain sounds of the language, and therefore for you to be able to understand what a person is saying, your mind actually needs to subconsciously register the rhythm of that language. And this is why it is extremely crucial for you to kind of listen and listen and listen to the French language. Listen as much as possible. Listen to all rhythms of the French language. Listen to French in movies, listen to French on radio, listen to French. Even if you don't understand it exactly now, you will start understanding it once you practice more and more with the comprehensible input. So for example, if you are at A1 level right now, there are a number of books out there. Even Edito has audio recorded in it, and I would highly recommend starting with Coffee Break French for an A1 level speaker, someone who doesn't know a word in French, A0 for that matter. Because in Coffee Break French, the interviews happens in English. It is a very good podcast to listen to, very enjoyable, and they use French in the natural way. Like, there's a teacher and then there's a student, and the teacher is teaching French to a student, and you're just listening into that conversation. And that conversation for an A1 level is happening only in English and with some phrases of French thrown into it, and so that you can catch the phrase as it is and use it in that situation. Then they do talk about grammar, but the emphasis is not on grammar, the emphasis is on using the language. And step by step, the Coffee Break French teacher takes you from one level to another. And as you keep progressing, the component of English keeps getting reduced, and there are longer and longer passages of pure French. And I think it's a very good progression, for a beginner to kind of get a foot in the door with the French language and then build from there. Once you have reached the intermediate level, which is B1 plus, the game changes entirely. That is the time when you have to completely let go of the English language and immerse yourself only in French. And keep listening, keep listening, keep listening. Now, let's talk about engagement when learning. Now, the human mind is not going to simply learn just because you're exposing it to some content, or you're just going through some grammar, or not grammar books, absolutely not. Comprehensible input, just because you're going through a lot of comprehensible input, you have to engage with the content. So for example, when you're listening into your podcasts, you should make it a point that you're underlining the words that you don't know the meaning of. Do not stop the podcast then and there, because then you're actually hampering the natural flow of things. Just keep underlining things that you don't understand the meaning of. Then actively go out and search the meaning with your own hands. Write it down, make flashcards, do something, draw an image around it, highlight it with different words, and speak it out loud, and try to use that word yourself. When you start to speak, or when you want to write something, or when you're reading it again, just notice that this word has come up again, and this is now in a different context. What is that different context? How is it different from the other context? You will realize that only when you engage with the content, that is when you start retaining things. Because otherwise, it's like, imagine this: there's a shower that you're taking with a lot of water is flowing through your body, and that's good, you're immersed in water, but it's not enough, right? You need to kind of move your hands and do the work to kind of accomplish the process. Let's talk about S, why have I actually mentioned speaking right at the beginning of this framework? This framework is meant for a beginner, right? Because I want beginners to start talking as soon as possible. Remember, I booked my first lesson of French only after having spent 6 months doing books and just doing random vocabulary, like just understanding words individually and not really understanding the language. Imagine if I had taken that lesson 3 months and not 6 months down my study of the French language, I would have derived the same lessons 3 months before. I could have saved those 3 months and understood that this is not how it works, right? So you need to go out there and actually start speaking earlier than you think that you're comfortable in speaking the language. Be uncomfortable with the French language. Whenever you start, for example, not right at the beginning, but I would say definitely within the first month or within the first 2 months at max, you should start speaking the language. You should start at least getting into the conversation. Start with the basic etiquettes, right? Say bonjour, right, with the right pronunciation. And this is where speaking, under the component of speaking, I would highly recommend master pronunciation right at the beginning. Place extra emphasis on pronunciation, because pronunciation is like the building block of your speaking ability. So use the first 2 months to understand different sounds of the French language, because there's some sounds in French which we do not have in Hindi, which we do not have in English or even Punjabi or any other regional language that you may have. Unlikely that you'll have the same sounds in French. So understand which are those new sounds. Do a lot of practice the conventional, the traditional way here. Just like grammar experts are pointing it out, do place extra emphasis on pronunciation right at the beginning and start speaking earlier than you think you are prepared to speak. You will, and trust me on this, no language speaker, no language learner is ever ready to start speaking. I still feel a little hesitant when I have to start speaking in French, although not at all right now compared to what it was in the beginning. But you have to start speaking the French language earlier than you think. And this completes the framework. As a beginner, I would again say, make sure that your emphasis is placed on listening and speaking first. Reading is something that your mind is doing subconsciously when you're going through the books, when you're going through the podcast, transcripts and all of that. Definitely, whenever you're listening, you're also reading the material. Whenever you're mastering pronunciation, you're reading the letters and how they should sound like. So reading is something that is going to happen constantly. You don't have to think about doing reading practice. Reading is the foundation, one of the foundations. Just like listening to language is the foundation of understanding, reading is also there. And reading is something that you cannot escape even as a beginner. So do not worry about the writing part right now. Worry about writing only after you reach B1. First focus on listening, because listening is actually very, very crucial for you to understand right at the beginning. Then start speaking as soon as possible, and I'll explain you that how listening and speaking are very connected to each other. The more you listen and the more you contextualize the listening practice, the more help you will get in speaking the language. The more you have listened to other people speak, the better your mind would be equipped to mimic what it has listened to already. Language learning is about mimicking other people. It is not about coming up with your own formulations all the time. And even if you do come up with your own formulations which are different, which are perhaps grammatically correct, but different from what the native speakers are used to speaking, you will sound off. You will sound unnatural. And TEF Canada actually evaluates you on these principles also. You have to be a natural speaker. You just have to sound like a real French person. Like if you go to France or if you go to Canada or if you go to any other francophonic country, you have to talk in a way that people understand, because that's the point of communication, right? That is the point of language learning. Sure, people will understand you, but it would be better if you can speak just like them. So try to mimic that. And the more you listen to, the more your brain will have the opportunity to mimic other people. And that is how you become fluent in the French language.